The gentle lavender grass of Lyria bent under the weight of the armored boot, then sprang back without a mark. The air smelled of sweet pollen and damp earth. For the soldiers of the 7th Galactic Peacekeeping Unit, it was like walking through a painting. A very quiet, very easy painting. From a high vantage point, Sergeant Jean watched the valley below through the display in his helmet. His view was a tapestry of light. Green outlines marked the trees. Blue tags hovered over the positions of his 4 squad mates. Small, pulsing red dots marked the dissident militia fighters hiding in a cluster of low, mushroom-like buildings. It was a simple tactical puzzle. He had already solved it in his head 10 minutes ago. "Squad, sound off," Jean said. His voice was calm inside the sealed helmet. "Zoom in position. I have 7 heat signatures on the western storage hut. No movement." The sniper's voice was cool and precise. She was perched 500 meters away, her long-barreled plasma rifle resting on a rock. Her armor, coated in adaptive gray film, made her look like part of the landscape. "Tae-suk is ready." The voice was a low rumble. The heavy gunner stood like a monument near the valley entrance, a rotary plasma cannon cradled in his arms. The weapon probably weighed more than a small vehicle. In his powered armor, it felt like a toy. "Scout Ji-hoon confirms the east path is clear. No surprises." Ji-hoon was a flicker of motion on Jin's display, having just completed a silent loop around the militia's rear. He moved with a dancer's grace, his lighter armor barely disturbing the tall, glowing reeds. "Haiju here. Their communications are basic. I have uploaded a false command signal to their network. They think their reinforcements are 10 minutes out. We have 15. The tech specialist's tone was bored. She was sitting comfortably behind a large tree root, her fingers dancing over a holographic pad projected from her wrist. Jean allowed himself a small smile. This was the routine. This was domination. The Galactic Coalition had perfected war into a science. Superior intelligence, superior technology, and superior training made the outcome a foregone conclusion. The Marauders were the surgeons of this science. Their job was to be clean, fast, and efficient. "All right," Jean said. "Standard sweep. Tae-suk, you provide suppressing fire on my mark. Sumin, you prioritize anyone with a heavy weapon. Ji-hoon, you flank from the east once the shooting starts. Haiju, keep their ears full of static. Let's finish this before lunch." There was a chorus of easy confirmations. This was their 5th operation on Lyria. The local militia were angry farmers and disgruntled miners, not soldiers. They had outdated energy rifles and a cause no one fully understood. To the Marauders, they were just obstacles. "Mark," Jean said. The piece of the Lyrian Valley shattered. Tae-suk's cannon came to life with a deep, throbbing whump whump whump. Bolts of blue plasma, each the size of a drink can, streaked across the field. They did not explode. They melted. The front wall of the main hut turned into molten soup, glowing hot and dripping to the ground. The red dots inside Jin's display scrambled in panic. A single, sharper crack echoed from the ridge. Sumin's work. A red on Jin's display, one holding a rocket launcher, vanished, heavy weapon down. Sumin reported. Her voice flat. Ji-hoon was already moving. Jean watched his blue tag glide swiftly around the side of the compound. 2 militia fighters ran out a back door right into him. Ji-hoon didn't fire his weapon. He simply stepped forward. One powered gauntlet struck a man in the chest. The sound was a dull, sickening thud, audible even over the noise of Tae-suk's cannon. The man folded and dropped. The other fighter turned to run, and Ji-hoon swept his legs out from under him with a casual swipe. "East entrance clear," Ji-hoon said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Jean walked forward, his own rifle held loosely. He felt no adrenaline. This was procedure. A fighter popped up from a window, firing a wild spray of green energy bolts. They sizzled harmlessly against Jin's chest plate, leaving faint scorch marks. Jean didn't flinch. He aimed and fired a single pulse. The window frame and the fighter behind it disappeared in a flash of light and smoke. "They're surrendering," Haiju called out. broadcasting on all frequencies. They're throwing their weapons out. The whump of Taesuk's cannon stopped. The sudden silence was filled with the sound of crackling fire, dripping metal, and the faint, frightened cries of the surviving militia. Jean lowered his rifle. Cease fire. Secure the area. It had taken 3 minutes and 47 seconds. No damage to the squad. No complications. Perfect. The team converged on the central compound. Their armor, scuffed and warm from the brief action, clicked and whirred softly. They moved with the relaxed confidence of a team that had never truly been challenged. Ji-hoon used a cable from his armor to bind the hands of the 10 surviving militia members. The fighters looked small and terrified in their simple cloth clothes, their eyes wide as they stared up at the hulking, faceless warriors of the coalition. Threat neutralized, Jean reported to command. Ready for prisoner transport. Acknowledged, marauders. A smooth voice replied in his ear. Hold position. Transport is en route. Taesuk thumped the side of his cannon. A familiar gesture. Too easy. These Lyrians, they don't know how to fight. They just stand there. It's not a fight, Sumin said, climbing down from her perch. She popped the energy cell from her rifle. It's pest control. Haiju chuckled, still looking at her datapad. Their encryption was a joke. A child from the core worlds could have cracked it. Jean listened to his team, his helmet off now. The sweet, alien air filled his lungs. He agreed with them. This was their purpose. To bring order through overwhelming force. To win so completely that conflict seemed pointless. They were the best in the sector because they made the hard look easy. In the distance, the low hum of the prisoner transport ship grew louder. Another mission was about to be logged as a success. The squad began their post-operation checks, a routine as familiar as breathing. There was no talk of the enemy, no analysis of tactics. There was nothing to analyze. They had dominated easily. It was just another day on a peaceful, gentle world far from the brutal front lines of real war. The idea that anything here could challenge them was, quite simply, unthinkable. The hum of the prisoner transport ship faded into the soft Lyrian sky. The marauders stood in the quiet of the ruined compound. The smell of melted rock and charged air was starting to replace the sweet pollen. Jean was about to give the order to move back to their own dropship when a new, sharper sound cut through the AI. It was the high-pitched whine of an approaching thrust engine. But it was wrong. It was rougher, louder, a strained metallic scream compared to the smooth purr of coalition craft. The squad turned as one, hands going to their weapons again. A ship descended from the clouds. It was not a sleek coalition dropship. It was a blocky, utilitarian cargo lander, its hull stained with black carbon scoring and patches of rust-colored primer. It looked old and tired. It did not land gracefully. It came down hard on the lavender grass about 50 meters away, its landing gear sinking slightly into the soft soil with a crunch. Jean felt a flicker of irritation. This was not on the schedule. His helmet was off, so he tapped the communicator on his wrist. Command, this is Marauder Lead. We have an unscheduled landing at our coordinates. Identify. There was a brief crackle of static. Then the voice from command returned, smooth as ever but with a slight edge. Acknowledged, Marauder Lead. This is a local asset integration. A liaison. Provide necessary cooperation. Further details to follow. A liaison? From where? Jean asked, his eyes fixed on the ugly ship. From the nearby human colony. Earth classified. Provide cooperation. Command out. The link went silent. Jean stared at his wrist. Earth classified. The words sat in his mind like a stone. Everyone knew the classification. Deathworld. Category 10. Planets with gravity too strong, wildlife too aggressive, weather too violent to allow for easy civilization. Humans came from such a place. They were a curiosity in the coalition, often seen as brutish and backward, strong but unrefined. They were not usually placed with elite units like the Marauders. Taesuk groaned loudly. What now? A babysitting job? Sumin had her helmet off, her sharp eyes narrowed. A human? From Earth? What can they possibly add? Their technology is generations behind. Ji-hoon just shook his head, a smirk on his face. Maybe they need us to show them how a real military operates. Haiju was already searching on her datapad. Earth, their standard infantry gear is primarily projectile-based. Chemical propellants. They still use knives. As standard issue, the squad exchanged looks. Knives. It was almost comical. The ramp of the cargo lander slammed down with a loud clang, hitting the ground hard. Steam hissed from its hydraulics. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a figure walked out. The first thing Jean noticed was how little she wore. No power armor. Just a set of dark, rugged environment suit pants and a tight-fitting reinforced jacket. The material looked tough, but it was soft, offering no visible plates or energy shielding. On her back was a large pack, and slung across her chest was a long rifle with a wooden stock and a metal barrel. It looked ancient. A real, actual knife in a worn sheath was strapped to her thigh. She was a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s. Her black hair was tied back in a simple, severe knot. Her face was calm, but it was not the bored calm of the marauders. It was the calm of a rock in a river. Her eyes, a dark brown, swept across the scene. The melted buildings, the bound prisoners, the armored squad, in one swift, assessing glance. She did not look impressed. She did not look awed. She looked like she was checking inventory. She walked towards them. Her walk was not the careful, balanced stride of someone in heavy armor. It was a direct, economical walk. She stepped over a piece of smoldering debris without looking down. She stopped in front of Jean. She was shorter than him, especially without armor. She had to look up, but her gaze did not feel like she was looking up at all. "Sergeant Jean," she said. Her voice was clear and firm, without the filter of a helmet comm. "I am Corporal Mireille. I am assigned as your local terrain and tactical liaison for this sector." There was a moment of silence. Jean just stared at her. Liaison? She looked like she belonged in a history museum. Tae-suk couldn't hold it in. He let out a short, loud laugh.
Terrain liaison?
"You are the liaison? What is that?" He pointed a thick, armored finger at her rifle. "Does that even fire? I haven't seen a weapon like that outside of a video archive." Mireille turned her head slowly and looked at Tae-suk. She did not smile. She did not get angry. She just looked at him, her eyes moving from his face down to his massive cannon and back up. "It fires," she said simply. Then she looked back at Jean, dismissing Tae-suk completely. "My file has been transferred to your network. I know the local patterns. The militia is not your only problem here." Jean finally found his voice. The irritation was hot in his chest now. "Corporal, with respect, we just handled the militia. In under 4 minutes. Our problem is solved. Our intelligence is comprehensive." He gestured at Haiju, who was still holding her advanced data pad. Mireille's eyes went to Haiju's pad, then back to Jean. "Your intelligence tells you what is on the network, or what gives off a heat signature. It does not tell you what is in the dirt, or in the trees." She turned and looked towards the dense, bioluminescent forest that bordered the valley. "The quiet here is wrong." Ji-hoon stepped forward, his arms crossed. "My motion sensors swept that forest twice. There's nothing bigger than a bird in there." "Your sensors are very good," Mireille said, still looking at the trees. "I am sure they tell you exactly what they are designed to hear." She finally turned back to Jean. "I am ready to proceed. What is our next objective?" Jean felt a headache starting. This was a political assignment. Some coalition bureaucrat had decided to give the Deathworlder some field experience, and now he had to carry the weight. He could not refuse a direct order for cooperation. "Our next objective," Jean said, forcing his voice to stay even, "is a patrol sweep through the adjacent forest sector, a routine survey, to ensure no militia stragglers are regrouping." It was busy work, something to pass the time until their next real mission. Mireille nodded. "I will take point." "No," Jean said a little too quickly. "You will follow our formation. You will observe. That is how cooperation works." He could not have this relic wandering around and messing up their flow. For the first time, Mireille showed a flicker of something. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, like disappointment. But she just nodded again. Understood. As the squad geared up to move out, Jean watched her. She took a canteen from her pack and drank. She checked her rifle, pulling back a bolt on the side with a sharp clack before looking down the barrel. The motions were practiced, simple, and utterly foreign. She did not run a systems check. She did not calibrate a sight. She just looked and listened. Sumin leaned close to Jean as she fastened her helmet. Her breathing is too slow. She is not even stressed. Jean didn't answer. He just looked at the Deathworld girl, standing alone on the trampled grass, looking at the forest as if she could see straight through the trees. For the first time in a long time, a mission felt unclear. An unplanned variable had been introduced, and Sergeant Jean did not like variables. The marauders moved into the forest. Their world became a symphony of green light and shifting data. Inside their helmets, the peaceful woods were translated into a battlefield map. The tall, slender trees with their glowing blue bark were outlined in wireframe. The soft moss underfoot was analyzed for density and load-bearing capability. Small, harmless creatures that skittered in the underbrush appeared as tiny, fleeting yellow dots on their motion trackers. They moved in a diamond formation. Jean was at the front. Tae-suk was at the rear, his heavy footsteps now silent on the soft ground thanks to his armor's noise-dampening systems. Sumin and Ji-hoon were on the flanks, their eyes on their respective sensor feeds. Haiju was in the center, her focus on the broader electronic spectrum, ensuring no hidden signals or traps were waiting for them. Mireille walked just behind Jean, as ordered. She did not have a helmet. Her head moved constantly, a slow, steady rhythm. Her eyes did not look at the path ahead, but at the spaces between things. She looked at the base of trees. She looked up at the intertwining branches. She looked at the patches of moss, noting where it was crushed. She did not speak. The contrast was jarring. The squad was a unit of silent, graceful machines, their movement a product of technology and training. Mireille was a lone animal in the woods, every sense seemingly stretched out to touch the environment around her. To Jean, it seemed like a performance, a pointless one. Hold. Ji-hoon's voice came through the comms, clean and digital. I have a slight thermal bloom, 50 meters east. Fading. Probably a decaying animal carcass. Noted, Jean said. Continue sweep. They walked another 100 meters. The forest was quiet, but it was the normal quiet of a peaceful world. Their systems confirmed it. No hostile signatures. No anomalous readings. Just life, going about its business. Mireille stopped walking. Jean took 2 more steps before he realized she was no longer behind him. He turned, irritation flaring. She was standing completely still, one hand held up slightly, her head tilted. She was looking at a large tree to their left. Its roots were thick and twisted, creating a dark hollow at its base. Corporal, Jean said, his voice tight over the external speaker on his helmet. Keep up. We do not stop without cause. She did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the dark hollow. There is a cause, she said, her voice low but clear in the natural quiet. Ji-hoon sighed audibly over the comms. My sensors show nothing. 0 movement. 0 heat. It's a hole in the ground. Mireille slowly raised her hand and pointed at the ground near the roots. The moss. It is torn there, not stepped on. Torn from underneath. She then pointed up. And the branches above are broken. Not fallen. Broken from something dropping down from a higher branch. Jean looked. To him, it was just a messy patch of forest floor. The glowing moss was indeed disturbed, but it could have been anything. A falling branch, a small animal. His armor's multispectrum scan flashed over the area. It reported, biological debris, 95% probability plant matter. No threat. Your equipment is very good at telling you what it knows, Mireille said, as if she could read the display inside his helmet. It is not good at telling you what is hiding from it. Before Jean could reply, she took a slow, careful step off the path towards the tree. What are you doing? Sumin's sharp voice came through. Do not deviate from the formation.
Mikra ignoret her.
She moved closer to the root hollow, her body low. She didn't pull her rifle. She kept her hands open and ready. A wave of tense silence fell over the squad comms. This was a breach of protocol. This was chaos. Then, from the blackness of the hollow, two things happened at once. First, on the squad sensor feeds, a blinding flash of red. A massive heat signature erupted from a state of near zero, a biological stealth trick their scanners had never encountered on Lyria. A creature, the size of a large dog but long and sinuous, launched itself into the air. Its skin was a perfect mirror of the bark and moss, now flushing with hot anger. It had too many legs, and its mouth was a ring of sharp, rotating teeth. It was a Lyrian canopy predator, a ghost stalker, known to be almost undetectable when still. Second, Mireille moved. She didn't jump back. She dropped straight down, letting the creature sail over her. As it passed, her right hand flashed to her thigh and came back up. The knife was in her hand. It was not a throwing motion. It was a planting motion. The predator landed where she had just been standing, its claws digging deep furrows in the moss. It whirled with impossible speed, its toothy maw gaping, ready to strike at the now exposed human. Taesuk was already swinging his massive cannon around. But he was too slow, the target too close to Mireille. Mireille was already rolling. She came up on one knee beside the creature, not in front of it. It was already committed to its lunge. As its body stretched, she drove her knife forward, not with a wild stab, but with a firm, precise push into the soft junction behind its head where its chitinous plates met. The creature shuddered. A harsh, chittering scream died in its throat. Its legs folded. It collapsed into a heap, its camouflage fading to a dull gray. The whole event, from launch to collapse, took less than 5 seconds. The forest was silent again. The only sound was the low hum of the Marauder's powered armor and the faint buzz of the dying creature's nerves. Mireille stood up. She placed a boot on the creature's body, pulled her knife free, and wiped the dark fluid clean on a patch of ordinary moss. She slid it back into its sheath. Only then did she look at Jean. Her breathing was slightly faster, but her face was still that calm mask. "It was waiting," she said, as if explaining a simple fact. "It knew we were here. It was letting the scouts pass, waiting for the bigger, noisier ones in the middle." She meant Taesuk. She meant High-Ju. No one spoke over the comms. The information on their displays, the sudden red flash, the now fading heat signature, taunted them. Their sensors had been useless. Their formation, their perfect diamond, had been a joke. The threat had been inside their perimeter before they even knew it existed. Ji-hoon was the first to find his voice, his usual smirk gone. "My motion sensors." They felt the footsteps of everyone in the squad. They filtered out the tiny vibrations of the forest. That thing, it didn't move until it attacked. It was a hole in the data. Mireille walked back to the path, stepping over the dead predator. She looked at Jean, then at the path ahead. "Your technology sees what it is told to look for," she said. "It is a tool. But your eyes," she tapped her temple, "should be the first tool, and the last." She didn't wait for an order this time. She simply started walking down the path again, leaving the stunned squad and their advanced armor standing over a primitive kill made by a knife. Jean stared at her back. The irritation was gone, burned away by a cold splash of shock. He had not given the kill order. He had not even processed the threat. She had seen it, understood it, and eliminated it before his brain had finished registering the creature as a target. "Move out," Jean said into the comm, his own voice sounding strange to him. The word was automatic. The confidence behind it was gone. The Marauders fell back into formation, but it felt different now. The diamond felt exposed. Their sensors felt blind. They kept looking not just at their digital displays, but at the actual physical woods around them, trying to see what the Deathworld girl saw. And failing. The tension in the squad was a physical thing, thick and silent. The forest seemed to watch them back now. Every shadow from the glowing trees felt deeper. Every rustle in the underbrush sounded louder. The Marauders' easy confidence was broken. They moved through the canyon approach not as rulers of the battlefield, but as intruders. The canyon was a beautiful, dangerous place. Giant arches of pale orange stone stretched overhead, woven with strands of glowing purple vines. A narrow, clear stream trickled along the floor. It was a natural choke point, perfect for an ambush. But their intelligence was clear. The militia was broken. Their patrol route was safe. The sensors all agreed. Jin's mind, however, was not on the sensors. It was on the quiet footsteps of the girl walking just ahead of him. Mireille had taken a position at the front of the diamond without asking. No one had stopped her. After the encounter with the predator, no one wanted to tell her she was wrong. She moved with a cautious rhythm, her eyes constantly moving from the high canyon walls to the stream bed to the gravel under their feet. Wide sensor sweep, Jean ordered, trying to reclaim some control. Haiju, full spectrum. Look for power signatures, composites, anything. Running it, Haiju replied, her voice focused. I'm getting faint mineral echoes from the rock. Normal plant life readings. No energy signatures. No metallic signatures. It's clean. Too clean, Sumin asked from her flank position. Her sniper's instincts were tingling, but her scope showed only rock and vine. It's just clean, Haiju insisted. There's nothing here. Mireille stopped. She crouched by the stream, dipping her fingers into the water. She brought them to her nose, then frowned. She looked up at the canyon walls, her eyes tracing a specific path along the vines. Corporal? Jean asked. He didn't like the question in his own voice. The water, Mireille said, standing. It smells of ozone, of hot metal, not from the rocks, from the air. Jihoon scoffed over the calm. Impossible. Air quality is pure. My suit's environmental scanner would pick up any pollutants. Mireille looked at him, her expression unreadable. Your scanner is in your armor. It samples the air inside a controlled system. I am smelling the air that is here. She pointed to a spot high on the West Canyon wall, where a thick cluster of vines hung like a curtain. And those vines are dead. Not dying. Dead. Their glow is gone. Something burned them from the inside, without a flame. Jean looked. She was right. A patch of vines about the size of a large vehicle was dark and brittle, a black scar on the colorful wall. His targeting system automatically framed it, but reported no threat. Vegetative decay. Cause unknown. A cold dread began to pool in Jin's stomach. This wasn't right. Two anomalies. The predator and now this. Coincidence on a routine patrol? He didn't believe in coincidences. Squad halt, he ordered.
Ihon, do a quick climb.
Get a visual on that sector. Sumin, cover him. Jihoon moved to the wall, his armor's gauntlets finding easy grips in the soft stone. He began to climb quickly towards the dead vines. Sumin settled into a stable stance, her rifle aimed at the cluster. Mireille watched, her body tense. It's not a person up there, she said quietly. Then what is it? Jean snapped, his patience worn thin by fear. Before she could answer, Jihoon was there. He reached the dead vines and used one hand to pull them aside. Lead, I've got something. It's a box, wedged in a crevice. Metallic. No markings. It's warm to the touch. There are ports on it. It looks old, but not primitive. Can you disarm it? Jean asked. I don't know what it is to disarm it. It's just sitting here, pulsing with a low-energy weight. Jihoon's voice changed. It's getting hot, really fast. I'm reading a massive power buildup. It's some kind of... The word generator never left his lips from the box, from the dead vines, from the very rocks around them. A wave of invisible force exploded. It was silent and blinding. It wasn't light or sound. It was a crushing pressure that hit their systems like a physical hammer. Every light inside Jin's helmet died. The green wireframe of the world vanished. The comforting stream of data from his squad disappeared into static, then into nothing. The soft hum of his armor's power core stuttered and went silent. The servos in his joints locked. He was suddenly trapped inside a multi-ton shell of dead metal that he tried to move. He could not. He tried to speak. His external comms were dead. His internal suit comms were dead. He was buried alive in perfect, immovable darkness. Panic, raw and terrifying, clawed at his throat. He heard nothing but his own frantic breathing echoing in the sealed helmet. He was blind. He was deaf. He was a statue. Then, through the thick plating of his helmet, he heard real sounds. Distant, muffled voices laughing. The crunch of boots on gravel. The militia. They were here. They had not been broken. They had been waiting. They had used a galactic war-era weapon, a concentrated electromagnetic pulse generator. It was illegal. It was supposed to be impossible for them to have it. But they did. The laughter grew closer. Jean strained every muscle, trying to get a finger to move, to activate a manual override. Nothing. The armor was a coffin. He heard a bang, like someone hitting Taesuk's immobilized form. A rough voice said, "Look at them, like statues in a garden. We'll melt them down for scrap." This was it. This was how the great marauders fell. Not in a glorious battle, but in a canyon tricked and shut down, to be picked apart by farmers with stolen toys. Shame burned hotter than the panic. Then, a different sound cut through the muffled voices. Crack.it was a sharp, singular, shocking sound. It did not belong. It was not energy. It was not technology. It was the sound of a chemical explosion contained in a metal tube. The laughter stopped. Crack. Another one. A man cried out in pain, a wet, gurgling sound. "What was that?" A militia voice yelled. "Where is it coming from?" Crack. A third shot. More yelling. Confusion. Jean, imprisoned in his dark shell, could only listen. The militia's boots were scrambling now, not walking. They were shouting orders over each other. They were not in control anymore. He heard the clang of metal on metal right next to his head. Then a scraping, wrenching sound at the seals of his helmet. Light, blinding and beautiful, flooded in as his helmet was violently unlatched and pulled open. The sweet, ozone-tainted air hit his face. Blinking against the light, he saw Mireille. Her face was smudged with dirt, her expression focused and utterly calm. She held a large metal tool in her hand, like a pry bar. "Your armor is a shell now," she said, her voice clear and steady. There was no fear in it. "Use it as cover. Do not try to move it." She didn't wait for him to respond. She was already moving to the next armor suit. Haiju's. Jean watched, his mind struggling to catch up. She was alive. Her gear was simple. It had no delicate electronics to fry. Her rifle, her knife, her tools, they all still worked. She was the only thing in the canyon that did. As she pried open Haiju's helmet, Jean saw movement on the canyon rim. A militia fighter was aiming a rifle down at her. Jean tried to shout a warning, but his voice was a dry croak. Mireille seemed to feel the danger. She dropped flat behind Haiju's armor just as a beam of green energy scorched the rock where she had been standing. She rolled, came up on one knee, and her rifle spoke again. Crack. The fighter on the rim jerked and fell in the sudden, echoing quiet that followed the shot. Mireille looked at Jean, then at the terrified face of Haiju now free from her helmet. "Get the others out," Mireille ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Then get behind the armor. This is not over." She turned away from them, reloading her rifle with a quick, practiced motion, her eyes already searching for the next target. The Deathworld girl was not just surviving the trap. She was starting a counterattack. Chaos reigned in the canyon, but it was a new kind of chaos. The militia's laughter was gone, replaced by shouts of confusion and panic. They had been the hunters a moment ago. Now they were being hunted by a ghost. Jean watched, still half-trapped in his armor, as Mireille moved. She did not run like a soldier. She flowed like smoke. One moment she was behind Haiju's bulky armor. The next she was a shadow against the orange rock, her rifle flashing up. Crack. Another sharp, painful sound. A man on the high path clutching his leg and tumbling down into the stream. "Sir." "Sergeant." Haiju was beside him, her face pale, her hands shaking as she worked on the manual release for his chest plate. What do we do? Jin's mind, trained for 1,000 perfect scenarios, was blank. His technology was dead. His squad was helpless. All he had was his own body, soon to be free from the armor, and a terrified tech specialist. He looked at Mireille. She was not looking back at him. She was scanning the canyon walls, her head moving like a predator tracking scent. She was in command now, not by rank, but by action. Get the others out, Jin said, forcing the words out, echoing her order. It was all he could think to do. Start with Sumin and Jihoon. Taesuk last. Use his armor as a bunker. Haiju nodded, her eyes wide, and scrambled towards Sumin's frozen form. Mireille ducked back behind the armor as a volley of green energy bolts sizzled through the air. They sparked harmlessly off the thick plating. She knelt next to Jin as he finally clambered out of his own suit, his body feeling strangely light and vulnerable without its weight. Listen, she said, her voice low and fast. They have energy weapons. They have the high ground. We have cover, she tapped the dead armor. And we have surprise. But not for long. What is the plan? Jin asked. The question felt foreign. He always gave the plans. Your sniper. Can she still use her scope if the power is off? Jin looked at Sumin, who was just being pulled from her armor by Haiju. She looked dazed, but she was nodding, clutching her long, now useless plasma rifle. Yes, the optics are glass. They still work. Good. Get her up on that rock. Mireille pointed to a tall, flat stone near the stream. She is our eyes. Your scout, Jihoon. Is he fast? And quiet. Freed from his armor, Jihoon was already stretching, his face a mask of anger and shock. I'm fast, he said. His voice tight. Mireille grabbed Jihoon's arm. Her grip was strong. You are not a scout now. You are a hunter. Your armor made you strong. Now you must be clever. See the knife on your belt? Use it. Do not fight them. Ambush them. They are loud and scared. You are not. She turned to Haiju. You, the big one's weapon. The rotary cannon. Does any part of it work without power? Haiju, still breathing hard, looked at Taesuk's massive gun. The ammunition feeder is mechanical, but the ignition for the plasma bolts is electronic. It's dead. Can you remove the plasma cells? Mireille asked. Yes, but they're just inert canisters without the good. Give one to the heavy soldier. Mireille looked at Taesuk, who was finally being freed. The big man looked lost, his hands empty without his cannon. Mireille threw a heavy, cylindrical plasma cell to him. He caught it on instinct. This is not a gun. It is a rock. A very heavy rock. Or, she said, pointing to a small pin on the side, if you hit that pin very hard against something, it is a bomb. One big explosion. Use it once. Make it count. She was turning their world upside down. Guns were rocks. Scouts were hunters. Their multi-million credit gear was just cover and scrap metal. Jin, she said, using his name for the first time. You and I are the distraction. We have the only working firearms. She held up her old rifle. He had only his sidearm, a small plasma pistol. Its power cell was dead, but when he pulled it, he saw it also had a simple chemical propellant backup for emergencies. One magazine of old-fashioned bullets. He had never used it, never even thought about it. What do we do? Jin asked. We make noise, Mireille said, a flicker of something hard in her eyes. We make them look at us, so the others can move. She didn't wait for agreement. She leaned out from behind the armor and fired 2 quick shots up at a cluster of militia on the east wall. Crack, crack. They ducked for cover, shouting. Now, go! She hissed at Sumin, scrambled to the high rock, lying flat and peering through her scope. I see 6, 2 on the east ridge, 3 moving along the stream bed to the north, 1 staying hidden behind the generator box. Jihoon was already gone, a blur in his gray bodysuit, slipping into the stream and disappearing behind the large boulders. He held his combat knife in his hand. It looked small. It looked deadly. Tae-suk hefted the heavy plasma cell in one hand like a club, his other hand holding the pin. Mirai looked at Jean. You take the 2 on the east ridge. I will take the 3 in the stream. Do not aim for the body. Aim for the cover around them. Make them keep their heads down. He nodded. It was a terrible plan. It was a desperate plan. It was the only plan. Jean raised his pistol. Felt wrong in his hand. He aimed at the rock face just below the 2 militia fighters and pulled the trigger. The sound was not the clean hiss of plasma. It was a loud, jarring bang that kicked in his hand. Chips of stone exploded. The fighters jerked back. One fired a wild shot back that went high and wide. From her position, Mirai fired 3 times in quick succession. Crack, crack, crack. The shots pinged off the stones near the 3 men advancing up the stream. They scattered, diving behind rocks. In that moment of distraction, Ji-hoon appeared from behind a boulder right next to one of the scattered men. There was no cry, no struggle. Ji-hoon's arm wrapped around the man's neck. The knife flashed once, and he pulled the body silently out of sight. The hunter had made his first kill. One in the stream bed down. Sumin whispered from her perch, her voice trembling but clear. The militia leader, the one by the generator, was screaming now. They're not all locked down. Find them. Flush them out. They were no longer facing helpless statues. They were facing a problem they did not understand. A problem that shot back with shocking noise and moved like a ghost in the water. Mirai reloaded her rifle, her fingers moving with a calm, steady rhythm. She glanced at Jean. They are confused. Good. Confused people make mistakes. Be ready. She was not just fighting. She was directing a battle with pieces no one else knew how to use. And Jean, the elite sergeant, was following her lead, one loud, primitive gunshot at a time. The canyon was no longer a trap. It was a killing ground, but not the one the militia had planned. Mirai had changed the rules. The quiet was gone, replaced by the sharp cracks of her rifle, the occasional bang of Jin's pistol, and the confused shouts of men who had lost control. Jean felt a strange, terrible clarity. His world had shrunk to the rock in front of his face, the weight of the pistol in his hand, and the sound of Mirai's breathing beside him. There was no data stream, no command channel, just the next breath, the next shot, the next order from the Deathworld girl. Sumin, Mirai said, her voice a low hum. The one by the generator. The leader. Where is he looking? From her rock, Sumin called down, her voice steadier now. He's shouting at the 2 on the east ridge, pointing at your position. Good. Mirai tapped Jin's arm. Stop firing. Let them think they pinned us. The sudden silence from their position was louder than the gunshots. The militia leader took the bait. They're out of ammo. Or hiding. Rush them, he yelled. The 2 fighters on the east ridge stood up from behind their cover, raising their rifles. It was the mistake Mirai was waiting for. Now, Tae-suk, she shouted. From behind the bulk of his own dead armor, Tae-suk rose. He was not a gunner anymore. He was a pitcher on some primal field. He cocked his arm and hurled the heavy plasma cell, the size of a water bottle, in a high spinning arc. It was not a good throw. It was not aimed at the men. It was aimed at the rocky outcrop just above them. The canister clanged against the stone, the impact detonating the emergency pin. The explosion was not the focused burst of a plasma bolt. It was a violent, concussive thump of raw energy and shrapnel. It blew a chunk of the ridge apart. The 2 militia fighters were not hit by the blast itself, but by a rain of shattered rock. They were thrown from their feet, screaming as they tumbled down the slope, their weapons flying from their hands. East Ridge clear, Sumin called. The militia leader screamed in rage. He stepped out from behind the generator box, aiming a rifle towards Tae-suk's position. He never saw Ji-hoon. The scout had moved like a spider, climbing the vines on the far wall, circling above. He dropped down, landing on the leader's back. They fell in a heap. There was a brief, ugly struggle. Then Ji-hoon stood up, wiping his knife on his pants. The leader did not move. Generator clear, Ji-hoon said, his voice hollow. He picked up the leader's rifle, checked it, and slung it over his shoulder. The 3 remaining militia in the stream bed were now alone and terrified. They saw their leader fall. They saw their comrades on the ridge gone. They were caught between Jean and Mireille in front, and Ji-hoon behind them. Point 1 turned to run back down the stream. He ran straight into Haiju. She was not a fighter. She was holding a rock in both hands, her face white with fear. As the man stumbled towards her, she didn't think. She swung the rock with all her strength. It hit him in the side of the head with a dull thud. He dropped, stunned. The last 2 men froze, looking from Mireille's cold stare to Ji-hoon with his new rifle, to the tech specialist now standing over a fallen man with a bloody rock. They dropped their weapons. Their hands went into the air. "Do not shoot! We surrender!" One of them cried, his voice breaking. The echoes of the last gunshot faded. The canyon was quiet again, but it was a different quiet. It was the quiet after a storm. The air smelled of burnt rock, chemical propellant, and blood. Mireille stood up slowly. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired. She walked over to the 2 surrendering men, disarmed them with quick, efficient moves, and used their own belts to bind their hands. She did it all without speaking. The marauders gathered in the center of the stream, around their dead armor. They were a sorry sight, out of their shells in their simple body suits. They were just people, shaken, bruised, and smeared with dirt and grime. They looked at each other, then at Mireille. She was checking the generator box, ripping wires from it with a sharp tug. The faint hum of the EMP field died completely. As if a switch had been flipped, the status lights on Jin's armor flickered. A low power cycle whine filled the air as one suit, then another began a reboot sequence. Their technology was coming back online. It was far too late. Jean walked over to where Mireille stood by the stream, washing her hands and knife. The water ran pink, then clear. "You knew," he said. "It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact." "I suspected," she corrected, not looking at him. She sheathed her knife. Dead vines in a living forest. Metal smell on the wind. It was a place for an ambush. Your technology told you the ambush wasn't there. My instincts told me the ambush was the place itself. She finally looked at him. Her dark eyes held no blame. You fight a war of information. You trust what your machines tell you. On my world, the machines break. The power fails. The weather kills satellites. Then you have only what is here. She tapped her head. And what is here? She held up her hands, still wet from the stream. You have to trust these more. Jean looked back at his squad. Sumin was hugging herself, her sniper's calm shattered. Ji-hoon stared at his hands. Tae-suk sat heavily on a rock, looking lost without his cannon. Haiju was crying quietly, the rock she had used lying at her feet. They were alive, because of her. "We would be dead," Jean said, the words ash in his mouth. Mireille nodded. "Yes, but you are not dead. Now you know what dead feels like. It is a good lesson. Better than winning easily." She picked up her rifle and slung it over her shoulder. She looked at the newly powered-up, sleek armor suits, then at the battered humans around them. "Your tech is coming back. Your comms will work. You will call for pickup. You will report a victory." "It wasn't our victory," Jean said. "It was a survival," Mireille replied. "That is the only victory that matters in the end. Remember this canyon. Remember the silence when your armor died. That silence is the only thing your enemy ever really wants to give you." She walked past him and sat on a low rock, cleaning the inside of her rifle's firing mechanism with a piece of cloth. She had returned to being just a soldier, waiting for extraction. But nothing would ever be the same. For any of them, the marauders had not just been saved. They had been unmade, and in the broken pieces, they had seen a terrifying, simple truth about what it really meant to fight. The dropship from the coalition was a smooth, quiet bird of polished metal. It landed in the canyon, a stark contrast to the blocky, groaning lander that had brought Mireille. Its engines hummed with a gentle power that now felt strange to Jin's ears. The squad stood by their armor. The suits were powered up again, standing tall and imposing. The damage was minimal, some scuffs, some scorch marks. To a casual observer, they looked like they had completed another routine operation. But the people outside the armor were different. Sumin's hands would not stop shaking. She held them clenched at her sides. Ji-hoon was silent, his usual smirk replaced by a distant, hollow look. He kept glancing at his knife, then wiping his palm on his leg. Tae-suk moved slowly, like a man carrying a great weight. He looked at his powered-down cannon but did not touch it. Haiju had stopped crying, but her face was pale, her eyes red. She stared at the ground. Only Mireille seemed unchanged. She had repacked her gear, filled her canteen from the stream, and now stood waiting, her rifle on her back. She watched the coalition soldiers who spilled from the dropship. They moved with the same easy confidence the marauders had owned just hours before. They secured the prisoners, scanned the area with handheld sensors, and nodded with professional satisfaction. A coalition officer, clean and crisp in his uniform, approached Jean. "Sergeant, report says you encountered an EMP device and neutralized the remaining hostile forces. Excellent adaptability. Minimal damage to coalition equipment. Another successful mission for the marauders." The words were perfect. They were the words Jean had spoken 100 times. They felt like a lie so big it choked him. He looked past the officer at Mireille. She met his gaze, her face neutral. "The adaptation was not ours," Jean said, forcing the words out. "We were immobilized. The EMP neutralized all systems. We were combat ineffective." The officer waved a hand, a slight smile on his face. "Semantics, Sergeant. Your unit survived and eliminated the threat. That's what the record shows. The method is a footnote." He glanced at Mireille, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I see the Earth liaison was present. I trust she didn't get in the way." Something hot and sharp rose in Jin's chest. He saw Mireille's slight shift in stance, the way her eyes cooled. She said nothing. She was used to this. "She did not get in the way," Jin said, his voice low and firm. "She is the reason the record shows a victory and not a list of casualties. She engaged the enemy, directed the squad, and secured the objective after our technology failed completely." The officer's smile faded. He looked at Jean, then at the battered squad, then back at Mireille with new, appraising eyes. "Is that so? Well, I'm sure her unconventional methods were instructive." The dismissal in his tone was clear. He turned back to his datapad. "Your transport is ready. Debrief at base camp in 2 hours." The officer walked away. The moment was over. To the coalition, nothing had changed. The squad began to load their gear onto the dropship. They moved their armor onto mag clamps. It was slow, quiet work. No one joked. No one talked about the mission that Jean helped clamp Tae-suk's massive suit. The big man spoke, his voice a rough whisper. "She told me my cannon was a rock. And then, it was. I have never felt so stupid. Or so strong." Ji-hoon was nearby, listening. He looked at his hands again. "I have been a scout for 5 years. I have run 1,000 sensor sweeps. I never learned to see the hole in the data until she pointed at it. I killed a man with a knife. I never have before. Not like that." Sumin walked past, her sniper rifle cradled in her arms like a child. "My scope showed me everything. And I saw nothing that mattered until she told me where to look." Haiju was the last to approach the ramp. She paused in front of Mireille, who was waiting to board. The tech specialist looked down, then up, her face struggling. "I used a rock," she said. Her voice small. Mireille nodded. "It was a good rock. The right tool for that moment." "I was so scared," Haiju whispered. "Good," Mireille said. "It wasn't cruel. It was a fact. Fear tells you that you are alive. Tells you that you must act. You acted. You are here." Haiju swallowed hard, then gave a tiny nod and climbed into the ship. Jean stood by the ramp. He looked at Mireille. The words felt inadequate, but he had to say them. "Thank you. For our lives." Mireille looked at him, then at the sleek dropship, then back at the canyon. You are welcome. But thanks are not what you need. What do we need? Jean asked. To choose, she said simply. You can put your armor back on. You can let the machines tell you the story of today. You can let the officer write his report. You can go back to dominating easily. She paused, her dark eyes holding his. Or you can remember the silence. You can remember what you did with a rock and a knife and a gun that goes bang. You can remember that you are not your armor. The choice is the only thing that is yours. She walked past him and up the ramp, finding a seat alone by a viewport. Jean stood for a long moment in the Lyrian twilight. He looked at his hands. They were just hands. They had pulled a trigger on a simple gun. They had pried a friend from a metal coffin. They were not special. But today they had been enough. He boarded the ship. The interior was clean, bright, and quiet. His squad was strapped in, but they were not resting. They were staring at nothing or at their hands, or at the Deathworld girl sitting calmly by the window as the ship lifted off. Jean did not look at the mission report blinking on his wrist display. He looked out the window at the canyon falling away below. He saw the scar of the explosion on the ridge. He saw the stream where they had fought and survived. He saw the small, dark patch where the ghost stalker had fallen. He remembered the silence. The ship climbed into the stars, heading for the shining base camp in orbit, a place of perfect technology and easy answers. But the 5 people who called themselves the Marauders were not the same. The armor they would put back on would feel different, heavier, not because of its mass but because they now knew it was a shell. And inside that shell was something new, a memory of fear, a lesson in weakness, and the unblinking eyes of a girl from a world that did not allow for easy answers. They had not been saved by a hero. They had been shown a mirror, and in it, they had seen something raw, something human, and something far stronger than they ever knew could exist. The mission was over, but for the first time, Jean understood that the real fight, the one that mattered, had just begun.